All right, we are live, but attendees won't be able to launch from the Six Connects lobby until one more minute.
Okay, I've got,
With us today to be able to take us through this exciting topic, understanding inequity and how overcoming the digital divide can be a catalyst for a new future. Over to you, Dr. Bacot.
hey everybody, good to be with you today. Gina, is everyone going to be able to talk back and forth, or do we have to give them permissions to be able to do that? Since we have a smaller group, I think it'd be a lot of fun just to have a conversation instead of maybe a straight up presentation. Would that be all right?
Yeah, we can absolutely do that.
So if that's possible, I think I see some friendly names on the attendee list.
So I've just enabled two of the participants to be able to speak. So, yep, they'll be able to interact.
So, afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. If you don't mind, if you have your microphone in front of you and you're all plugged in,
Hello, hope all is well.
what's happening? Can you tell me everybody that's here and introduce yourselves?
Hello?
So we've got Gerald Moore.
Yes. Can anyone hear me?
I've got you good, Gerald.
Okay, good. My name is Gerald Moore. This is my first conference. I attended yesterday's and obviously today's, and we'll be attending tomorrow. And my company is Precise Analytics. We're a small company. It's just me, and I'm starting out and looking to get as much information as I can. So thank you in advance.
I think, Gerald, we tried to connect over the last few months, have we not?
Um, I'm not sure. Perhaps I'm just, whatever information I can get and from who, I'm just looking to soak up as much as I can. So probably.
Okay. Another one of my companies is EduSource, and I think that might have been where we tried to connect. Tony, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, Tony.
Good afternoon. I just thought the topic was interesting, so I signed up to listen. I'm recent retired senior management with IBM, and lately I've been helping in my husband's 21-year-old company doing digital automation, so transitioning them to cloud and electronic information systems for home healthcare.
Awesome. Great to meet you.
Same. Thank you.
And then we have Gregory, and it looks like Cynthia joined.
Yes, hello everyone. Gregory Flowers speaking. Thank you for having me.
Great to be with you, Gregory. Nice to meet you. And then looks like Cynthia joined.
Hi there. My voice is kind of croaky today. I'm a kind of semi-retired person, and I work in application integration, so kind of automating the movement of data from one app to another.
Very nice to meet you. So when it comes to a format like this, I want to make sure that you all get out of the time that we have together what you would like. And the topic is about this idea of understanding inequity. And the way I work is I own several businesses, and I'll tell you a little bit about my background, but storytelling is something that we can do together. And a process of that is kind of better understanding what you all are experiencing, what you're thinking about as we go through these things. So at any time that we can, have a little bit of a dialogue back and forth, I think that would be great. So I guess to get it started, the idea of overcoming the digital divide is different to me than maybe others. My work has been an entire career. So a little background: I have a bachelor's, master's, and PhD in mathematics. I spent the earlier part of my career traveling the United States on a sense of inquiry. So the company that you see on the slide in front of you was sort of the opus of that self-inquiry. So I grew up between two poles of poverty, rural Indiana and Ohio farmers and immigrants. My last name is Burkopes, which is Slovenian. My grandfather was the first one here, and lived and raised his family in Hallville, which is the west side of Indianapolis. And it's an interesting community for lots of really good reasons, and also one that has historically been blighted over the last 60 to 80 years. And my sense of inquiry came from the poles of poverty that rural Indiana and Ohio give you, which is predominantly low-resourced white, and then the community of Hawville, which was predominantly immigrants and low-resourced Hispanic and African-American communities, all different types of immigrants, in fact, from 143 different countries. And that sense of inquiry as I grew up between those two poles sent me on a pathway. So I graduated from my undergraduate at 21 because people told me I should go to college. And I didn't really have a reason to fight that, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And as I was studying, people told me finance, right? That's where you make money. And I thought money would be reasonably useful to have after you spent 4 years in college. And what happened was I ended up backpacking on a trip to North Carolina. And as I was in the Appalachia area between Tennessee and North Carolina, I came upon a school, and for whatever reason went in and applied and said, "Hey, I'm Kevin from Purdue. I want a job." And they hired me on the spot, believe it or not. And I moved there 2 weeks later and started a 10-year saga of going to communities of which I knew no one, and working in their schools, living in their communities. Usually what that meant was I would go to a place like New Jersey or Chicago or Austin, Texas, or Appalachia, North Carolina, and go to a place that felt dangerous. And then I would find the nearest school and apply, and then move to that community after inevitably you would get hired. And it was really a journey of trying to understand things that I don't still to this day understand. Things like poverty, violence, things like inequity, and those sorts of questions that would inevitably you can't figure out, and there maybe isn't rationality to them. And so as I traveled, I learned a lot about the education system, and I learned about things like digital divides. But I also learned things like there's a workforce issue in education, but it's not the way people are talking about it. In my opinion, the idea behind workforce is that you're trying to find a scalable group of people that can execute on a promise. And we do have that in education. We have tons of really talented people in ed. But what I figured out was that one is a truth. And the second is that they don't stay. And the reason that they don't stay is very complex, one of which is, I don't think the pay thing is as important as everyone says, but I do think that the situation of asking teachers to work with 175 young people every day in a 8 through 12 setting and do 90 hours of work is a problem. And it's also a problem when you work in schools that need you the most, where most teachers that I was around who put themselves into that situation for various complex reasons, they were gone by October. We would lose 1 in 5 teachers by October. In Chicago, by May, half of them were gone. And then it sort of pushed me to think about, what does the workforce of the future of education look like? And over the last 10 years, as I got a master's and PhD and was still working full-time as a teacher at both universities and K through 12 schools, we got a chance to really try something interesting, which is, I believe that the future of education is kids. They're in every school. They're incredibly good at communicating with each other, and they're the best teachers that they have in their lives. Or one other way of saying that is that they're the most impactful teachers in each other's lives. If we don't train them, they're going to teach them all the stuff that we teach each other, all the stuff that we don't want them to teach. But when you do train them, what we've learned, that peer tutoring is one of the most powerful tools that we have in the education system that also doesn't exist everywhere or anywhere for that matter. We started that model at the university, and then we moved it into K through 12 schools, right? So university, it went really well starting in 2012. We had 158 undergraduates working and teaching each other 42 undergraduate math courses. And they were serving, after about 3 semesters of operations, over 100,000 students a year, which is a huge operation. And we started getting research coming out that said, this really works. Letter grade and a half difference. Young people of color that are exposed to and participating in this type of tutoring were passing their mathematics courses at a rate of 85 to 90%, which, as many of you know, is the exact opposite is true at our undergraduate universities. And so this promise began, and then we got our first high schools in 2017. Gates Foundation funded us so that we got our first middle schools and elementary schools in 2018. And now we're all over Indiana and starting to scale nationally. And then something happened. As you all know, COVID hit. And we were geared up to be in 50 schools by this time in 2020. And when COVID hit and everything shut down, something happened. And what happened was that the digital divide in understanding inequity changed. What we knew every day working in schools all over the country, but also locally in Indianapolis, was that if school doesn't happen, kids don't get fed. And I thought everyone knew that. And I was so naive of what everyone knows. But, the fact is that we were packing 4 meals really a weekend for 600 kids at just one of our schools, let alone the 15 other that we serve. And I thought people got it. And I also thought people understood that when those kids went home, they don't have internet. They don't have devices that are not school provided. And they do not have the family structure, unfortunately, to support them to be able to get those things, oftentimes. And that inequity became so present to almost everyone, almost immediately because of this pandemic that we're all experiencing together, that we started to see society start talking about it. And then they started like throwing money at it, which is the typical process, right? So if we throw money at this situation, what are the typical activities that you would do? You would buy devices. You would send computers to homes. You would find Wi-Fi hotspots and use CARES Act money and all these other things. And we did this too. We got as many as we could delivered from the funding that I could generate by my network and by philanthropic organizations in the Midwest, and hundreds and hundreds of devices we were able to deliver. But as I was doing that, I also realized that one of the most important things about this inequity is that childcare is a part of the education system. And what I mean by that is when we have working families, often, and this is a personal opinion, that the women of the families are the chief academic officers of that family. So it is true research-wise that the female is education level and her value of education is directly correlated to children's success. And what we were doing with this COVID revolution thing happening was that the mothers were now expected to work full-time if their jobs were still happening. They were expected to manage e-learning for their kids or other people's kids. And then they were also expected to manage everything else that they already were asked to manage. And what we kind of came up with was that the biggest thing that we needed to produce for society to bridge this gap to inequity was to solve the digital divide, but also solve the expectations, management, everything else that a school really represents that we don't talk about, right? Performance, school performance. We don't talk about holding them accountable for how good they are at helping families raise kids. But we should, maybe, in my opinion, talk about that because that's really true. It's really important to understand those things. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are a part of it. But honestly, we, as a United States system, we provide 53 million students with a place that's relatively safe. They get fed and they get educated for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. In the public school sector, it doesn't cost a parent directly, though taxes and other things do pay for this. It doesn't cost them the child care costs that most families can't afford. So as we're thinking through being entrepreneurs and what we do, sort of dating back to what happened out of the university model, we spun it out and our company began to grow. I left the university in 2018 and began running these companies full time, and started to understand just how huge the inequity in terms of digital divide was, but also the inequity in regards to just access, right, to quality education. And it's not like people are standing in schools going, let's not help kids. It's the actual system is built to prevent that from happening based on the typical ways that humans operate. So one of those that we learned was, and I'll get back to the slide that's in front of you all, one of those that we learned was that there's no move up in the education system. If you're a classroom teacher at 22, let's say, you start teaching 3rd grade, it is likely true that at 64, you could still be teaching 3rd grade, making more money based on some sort of scale because of your years of experience, but there's no move up like what you would see in industry, right? There's no management, there's no career pathway, there's no these sorts of opportunities that people are attracted to. They want their career to grow and change and experience differences in what they do at 22 compared to 27 compared to 39. And education doesn't provide that. Other than moving into an administrator role, you really don't have that much of move up. So that's one thing we noticed. Another thing we noticed is pay, of course. Lots of people talk about that. And it is true that a classroom teacher is asked to do a lot to help families raise children and also educate them for not a huge salary. But the interesting thing is, what about some of the other things like equitable access to high quality content is dependent currently today on the idea of us being able to find a high quality math teacher, them going into a school and staying. Because everyone knows a new job, it takes you a while to figure it out. And usually the turnover rate for mathematics teachers in our current education system is 2 years or 3 years. So just in time for them to be kind of educated up and starting to hit their stride, they leave. And then in STEM, which is an acronym that means science, technology, engineering, mathematics, those teachers typically turn over at a rate where half of them or all of them are gone within 2 years. And I don't know how you build a team around that that's equitable, right? So the turnover ratios for schools that I worked in urban and rural areas was massive. And there was no team building that you could ever really accomplish. But then the other areas that are predominantly high resourced for various reasons, their turnover rate is way different. And so you have stability in homes because of high resource and what that provides. There are obvious complexities to that. There are some instabilities that high resource provides as well for young people. But you have stability at home and you have stability in the school. And then if you go to the schools that I've worked in over the years with high poverty, you have no stability likely at home. Sometimes home's the most dangerous for our young people. And sometimes it's, the most glorious place ever. But oftentimes in schools that serve students of high poverty, the school is a oasis for the young people. But there's no oasis there if the turnover rate for the adults that are been, sort of built to care, there's no consistency either. And oftentimes, like I said, the consistency at those schools is about 50% of the adults that are there leave every year. And a school leader and hanging our hats on finding dynamic school leaders for our most at-risk schools makes sense in theory, but they burn out in 3 years because just getting them there and not supporting them basically sets them up for failure. And we have plenty of evidence in Indianapolis with our charter schools and how that looks. So what we're sort of talking around and about is that there's this idea of inequity. The digital divide is not true at school. So at school, title funding provides us, especially school leaders, with the opportunity to provide one-to-one devices, tons they haven't heard from since March. And if they don't go back to a school where they can eliminate a certain number because they actually physically see them, that they have no idea how they're going to get in touch with these kids. And I mean, I was shocked, like 40% of a school district that has that many. We're talking hundreds of thousands of kids. I don't even know how to put my mind around it. And so we think and are working towards this every day, that the promise is that we have to get out into the community and build pods into homes, families, community centers, churches, and schools. When schools are empty, there's a lot of room to socially distance, right? So some schools that we work with have 90,000 square feet for an enrollment number of around 600 to 800. And that's plenty of space to space out and use your current or existing labor costs, which are professional teachers and staff and instructional assistants, to run what we call pods. And so this was the problem we were trying to solve, which was parents are struggling to manage their children's e-learning, causing fear and anxiety for families. Again, and I said this earlier, but we've had several people join, which is exciting. Happy Friday, everybody. The fear here is mostly put upon, and I've worked my entire career from this paradigm, and I'm happy to be criticized for it and talk about it, but I believe that if we're going to invest directly into communities through programmings like this that involve education or finance, that one of the best ways, or if the only way to do that, is to think about solving problems for the women in these communities. And the reason for that is that if we're going to co-raise children, who, at least in the United States, raising children predominantly falls still to this day on the female in the household. And so if we're talking about this pain here, right? So struggle to manage childs, it really could say, you know, the female of the home or the matriarch or any of those other languages that would make sense to you all. And we're trying to not only do that for families that can pay for it, which you could imagine a family that would be able to afford $150 to $225 a week per kid is a higher resource family than what most of us would be able to afford. So how do we make this equitable, where we understand that in a school district like Indianapolis Public Schools, there's 35,000 students, and most